How do I want to live my life? What do I want to do? I want to do cool things. I want to do cool things.
From the streets of Brooklyn, enter Jonny K. JK is not just about slinging shoes. He is the provocateur, constantly pushing the envelope of conventional design where form, function, and fashion are balanced in equal parts. With a passion for filmmaking, martial arts, he is one for you to know. Buckle up and get ready as we dive into the world of JK. It's going to be a hell of a ride. Jonny, welcome, man. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Myles. That's quite an intro. I was expecting someone else to show up for a second.
I was practicing all weekend. I'm like, I got to up my game because I've got the beast from the East on the call with us today, Jonny K. So let's start off with a brief dive. Let's get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
Who is JK?
Tough question. Still asking myself that every day. He's in progress. I'm a guy from Detroit. Grew up son of Big Three. Automaker and engineer. Went to art school, University of Michigan, did a little bit of sports, moved out to Boston after studying design, got into footwear, transitioned to New York City, got into more footwear, got into design, got into filmmaking, got into a bunch of things. What can I tell you? It's been an interesting ride. I've done my best to kind of push myself as much as I can creatively and, in all other aspects of my life. But yeah, man, I'm an open book. Ask me any question, I'll tell you.
Are you conventional or unconventional?
I'd like to think I'm unconventional, but it's always that's always a challenge, right? You get stuck sometimes. You get in your ways. You fall in with the masses. I mean, we work in or at least you and I both work in not only a competitive field but a consumer field. So it's easy sometimes to get swept up in the current. And I think you're as unconventional as you want to be at times, but the trick is to really kind of keep pushing and not for the sake of it, but for the sake of growing and being effective.
Yeah, let's lean into that for a moment. We've worked together at JV and RAG, and you had an amazing entrepreneurial start, which I want to dive into a little bit later. But one of the things I've always appreciated about you, JK, is a quote that you've carried around, which was really made a mark on me, which was, "Please do not understand me too quickly." And in the world of design, you're always balancing meaning, relevance, and creativity. Can you elaborate a little bit on that quote and why it resonates so much with you and the balance or the dueling swords that are constantly going on in the world of design in being creative versus commercial?
Sure. And I mean, I stole that quote from Andres Guy, but it's something I try to keep in mind, especially when we're in a culture now where information is very fast paced. We take short snippets of things and everything is presented at, face surface, sort of like, this is the image you get. You're making up your mind quickly. And I think that's a skill you need to have to be able to kind of make up your mind quickly. But at the same time, I don't want to be, I guess, boxed in too quickly on things. So, the more you learn about things, think about something that you love, something that really gets you excited. You do a deep dive, man. You'll exhaust all avenues. You want to learn about that. And I would like to not only be someone who has that depth, I would also like to create things that have that sort of depth or bring you into those worlds. So it's just the idea of like, there's often more to someone or to something than what you first encounter. And of course, you have positive first impressions, negative first impressions that may want you to either learn more or not. But I would hate to be judged too quickly and either not get sort of the presentation I want of myself, not being able to communicate the way I want, not being able to storytell the way I want the things that I do, but also just to be a bigger person, just to be a more rounded person, be a deeper person. I think that's kind of where that quote leads me to. Like, there's always something more,
No, I appreciate that. It shows the depth. There are multiple layers to who you are in your grain. And that was the one thing I've always appreciated about your creativity. It was never just, I'm going to design a product line, but you were writing a script and you were going to Muay Thai. And so multi-dimensional, where I knew we weren't going to get just a shoe. There was always a story behind it.
Sure. I mean, that's the whole, Charles and Ray Eames powers of 10 thing, that I learned in school. And it's that idea of like, you see something and and if we're speaking about footwear, like if I see a shoe on the shelf, it has to be interesting enough for me to want to go closer. If I go closer and pick it up, I want to be able to see something a little new. Oh, I didn't notice that from 10 feet away. I've got it in my hand now, and now I'm seeing something more interesting about it. And oh, wait, let me look inside it. Let me turn it over. It's like the powers of 10. You think about that sort of scaling, extraction of like, how close you get, how much you get into it. And it's kind of that same idea of like, the more you look at it, the more interesting it is. And that's not only good design, that's not only good storytelling. I mean, I would hope to think that is good, like people making too, good character building. Like if you have that inside of you, if you have those interesting things. And for me, the other thing I always like to think about, to your point, is just, how do I want to live my life? What do I want to do? And I want to do cool things. I want to do cool things. I want to do interesting things. And, not necessarily for the sake of like, I'm going to be an interesting person. I want to be involved in interesting things. And hopefully that kind of, brings a fuller life to me. And it also helps me spread those experiences around. It gives me a point of view that I can use in what I do that may be different from other people.
For sure. And we're all work in progress. Each one of us, and anyone that says we're not at any point in time in their career is given the worst head fake, or they're megalomaniacs, and I don't want them in my circle, so I appreciate what you're sharing. And I do want to dive in a little bit deeper on design with you just for a moment. So I'm always impressed on the battling swords, the conflict between creating product that you love and being commercial, and creating product that solves a problem versus creating product that makes a statement. What can you share with an aspiring designer or someone running a brand that's stuck and feels like they're being commoditized, where they're a slave to the profit and not the purpose?
I mean, I've been there. It's difficult. It's easy to kind of either lose your way or your motivation, or your love for it. I guess first question is like, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? What makes you happy? Or what problem are you solving? And oftentimes, as a designer or as someone for hire, we don't get to choose those problems sometimes, you know what I mean? And those problems can vary. A lot of times we think about solving a problem. We think, oh, this has to have a function. This has to allow me to run a little faster. This has to help me put my shoes on easier. This has to, aid me in some sort of daily function, and that's extremely noble, especially when you get into helping people who have trouble in daily functions. But sometimes problems are different. Sometimes for brands or companies, they're business problems, and they're bottom line problems. Sometimes for brands, they're positioning problems or communication, messaging, expanding your reach and sort of what you can do. So the problems all kind of change, and they're not necessarily all functional in the way we tend to think about it. I guess that's part of the gig, is kind of being able to solve multiple avenues of problems, and they might not all be the ones that you're excited about, but I guess that would be part of the job. And, like I said, you're not always calling the shots on those things, but there is, look, you can solve a problem, and you can also solve a problem in a very interesting way, in a way we didn't think about, or in a way, you know what I mean? There's ways.
So that's the conundrum. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just like, there's not one solution to every problem. So sometimes it's very exciting to figure out what the solution is, or what's a new solution, or like what makes you excited,
So when you look at it from a very commercial perspective, whether it was working at Coach or Allen Edmonds, and someone, a merchandiser or someone from accounting would say, hey, we need X number of SKUs and they've got a slot at these price points. One of the adjectives and verbs I like about you is the word subversive. I know you like to influence things subversively. Yeah. Would you intentionally overdevelop and overdesign so that you could always have your touch on it while also answering the ask, or would you defy and just be rebellious and do what you want?
That's a great question. Like, it's always good to under promise and over deliver if you can. It gets tricky when you're dealing with resources because, you do have to be responsible to resources. These things cost money, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I think you kind of owe it to yourself and your development to, go a little bit beyond. And if they're asking for something, you definitely want to complete that. If they're like, we need 7 SKUs, we need a range like this, yeah, you want to give them that, but you also want to be able to kind of maybe lead them. And maybe it doesn't go anywhere then, but it sets the stage. Like, okay, but what about this? I think this would be a great idea. And again, you have to be mindful of like the resources, the time it takes. You can't, sort of drop the ball on the thing that you need to do. But yeah, I mean, if I sat around and waited for people to tell me what to do all the time, like, I'd be boring, or I wouldn't be, pushing myself. And it's hard because, oftentimes you are the employee here, so you have requirements. But, it's like, I remember them telling me, Sid Mead, the great visualist and futurist, worked for, was it Ford? He worked for an automotive company. He would just stay late at night and draw cars because all he was doing at work was drawing hubcaps, and like really pushing. And eventually, like, the guy's working harder. The guy's doing it after hours. The guy's, really sort of creating interesting things we didn't think to ask him for. And that's kind of the idea, I guess,
So the message is let the bonfire burn hot, but don't interfere with what needs to get done to meet the master.
Well, if you think about it, if you reverse it, right, and you think, oftentimes consumers or the public or those who sort of consume media, things like that, they might not know what they want. We're giving them the thing we think they know what they want. Why is that any different from the people creating the thing? Sometimes they know what they want. Sometimes they don't know, or sometimes they're not aware. They might want something that you can show them. This is something we can do. I don't know why that can't go both ways. You know what I mean? Like, your job, I think, as a creative person and as a designer, there's many jobs I have a lot of thoughts on, but to touch back to what you said about, subversively influencing culture, which is something I like to always talk about, that's the subversive part, right? If you're just going to like politely influence culture or like, that's, everyone expects that. To subversively do it either means they didn't notice it, or you're like kind of, you're getting your stuff done. You're being a little bit strategic in how you, sort of
political.
Yeah, not even political. Just like, like there's, everyone has a voice they want out there,
Yeah.
and getting it out there and whether or not people want to hear it are two different things, but I think you got to try to get it out there.
Well said. I mean, the difference between asking permission and staying true to a purpose. I get it.
Oh, sure.
Like, I know where you're going with this. Yeah. So you touched on something about resource allocation, and I would pause for a moment because I know you're coming off a remarkable experience, and I would ask that we not mention any brand name and that we change all names to protect the guilty. But of course, anyone that goes to your LinkedIn page will figure out what we're talking about.
There's no guilty.
Okay, no guilt. But you conceived an idea. You put it to paper because I was there at Soho House when I met with you and a potential partner, and we looked at the deck. And then you brought it to life, and you were audacious enough to think you could sell $600 luxury handmade sneakers in a crowded marketplace. Can you take us on the journey on a high level? What happened? And I heard stories that you got screwed or that something changed in the business and you're focused now on your design consultancy. So I'm more interested in hearing from you the experience and the lessons learned.
Thank you. Because speaking about this, and I know you asked me to speak about this a little bit, makes me feel better about having that experience. Because there's been times where I'm like, wait, was that worth it? You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, absolutely was. I was in a place in my career where I had had sort of a run of just not satisfying experiences at companies. Great brands, but like I felt like I was a little bit stuck. I didn't really have the voice that I wanted. I felt like, my bosses were kind of starting to know less than I did, which was a weird place to be. So I wasn't learning. And look, man, I hope to surround myself with people who are smarter than me as well, but I just didn't feel like I was growing, right? So I can go to another brand, maybe like the last one I was at, I kind of got a bit of a bait and switch, and I was like, what am I doing here? I was in a really good place personally at the time. I owned my place in Brooklyn. I was married. I just had a kid. I was like, you know what? I'm stable personally. Maybe it's time to risk professionally and kind of bet on myself here. And so I had reached out to an old friend, former colleague, said, you know what? Why aren't we doing something together? We both like each other. We're both capable. Here's an idea I had. Gave him a deck. I remember speaking to you about it a little bit. I don't think this is right yet, this idea, but this is kind of where I'm going, and we kicked it around together and came up with a concept we really liked. And we thought we were very excited about. So we're going to do it, right? We're going to do this thing. We're going to give it a shot. Kind of that's on the checklist to do, right? Start a brand, really try. That was my way of I guess expanding what I was doing and really trying again to subversively influence culture in a more direct way. Here's the thing I want to do. I'm, doing all this other stuff for other people, but here's what I want to do. And so we did it. We were both sort of consulting for other people while we were trying to do it, because obviously startups don't with pay, especially initially. While you look for funding, I was designing, developing, going to do production, supply chain, all those things. And it was a challenge, but I wanted a challenge. I wanted to compete. And I found myself struggling initially at the thing that I'm really good at, which was design, because all of a sudden now I'm designing for myself, essentially, right? There's a difference between being a gun for hire and the guy who's hiring. The gun for hire, he may get to decide how to kill someone, but the guy who's hiring him is telling him who to kill and what message to send. And that's what I was sort of unused to, right? So I had to suddenly step into designing things for myself where normally I was looking for someone else's approval. And that took a minute. I wasn't expecting that at all. You know what I mean? You second guess yourself a little bit. Is this really what I want? Or have I been sort of institutionalized a little bit with some other things? On top of the challenge of you're launching a brand, you're trying to create product that is aesthetically different enough from what's out there. You don't want to be derivative. And this concept isn't derivative, so it deserves something that doesn't look like everyone else, but at the same time has to be desirable enough. You want it to be relevant enough to stick around, because it's going to take us some time to build this brand. And that was the big challenge initially. And then you step into everything else, like the challenge of the idea of the brand, the challenge of building it with the materials, doing things that were not easy. We chose a very difficult route, I think, supply chain wise and material wise and production wise, but it was all to try to create something that was different. We saw a white space. We felt we saw a white space, and there was a reason why people weren't doing it, because it was difficult, and it's much easier to not do it and just continue making money in a certain way. So that was the goal initially. That's how we started, and kind of fought through that for about a year and a half of design and development to get to a workable prototype, like a wear test sample.
Yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability and being reflective about the experience. I'm curious about what happened. There was sufficient time doing diligence, studying the market, prototyping samples. So between that stage and what I saw actually deliver on the e-com store, for me, I had a totally different experience. I felt that a product went from a functional, dynamic piece to something that was more of a fashion statement. Yeah. And maybe that's just my jaded perspective, but having that initial glimpse early on, Soho House with you guys, and understanding both of you guys as experienced operators, that despite the complexity of building and delivering, you guys had vetted those cost considerations and risk dependencies, that the actual product felt like it was a compromise. And I've always known you to appreciate distinct aesthetic and heirloom quality. And while the quality is always subjective, I get that, there's some standards that one would expect. And I just felt that some of the features and benefits weren't aligned with the aesthetics. So my perspective as an end customer, because I did buy a pair and loved them, wore them regularly and buzzed them as best I could here in the Mid-Atlantic, in support of everyone, not just you. I mean, it was the entire team. I mean, the whole group that you introduced me to were lovely, but
appreciate it.
What happened? It sort of got Rubik's Cube.
It's a great question. I would say a couple of things. I mean, what we were doing was very much a hybrid, and hybrids are the hardest thing to do because you have to strike a balance. You push too far one way or the other, you kind of lose the magic, right?
Hold up. Can we peel back just a minute? Can you explain what you produced and the price?
Sure. So,
that might help.
Yeah, okay. We're being too vague. So the idea was, both of us, me and my initial partner, had worked in performance athletics and also fashion and luxury, and had noticed that, okay, well, a lot of the performance brands, they have to price engineer to a specific price point, right? Kill zones, 120, 150 bucks. Maybe they flirt with 200, 250 on some of the really high end, like, very takes years of development, like performance stuff. But in order to do that, you have to cut some corners here and there. Maybe you're not using the best materials, or maybe, you are building it to a price point. The fashion brands, the luxury brands, I'll say, who can command very high price points, and we're also doing sneakers, they had no performance benefit to them, right? They were basically foot covering, made very well, right? Made with great materials, made in Italy and with craftsmen. So we're like, why can't we put these together? No one's putting this together, right? It satisfied both of our experiences very well. We were both kind of former athletes, or, I still try to stay athletic as I can, but not cut back on things. Can we spend the money to produce a performance level product in Italy with like the best craftsmen, the best materials? Like, what would that look like? So the development challenge was like, we're not thinking cost first here. We're thinking, what's the best thing we can do? What's the best ingredient that we can bring into the shoe? Now the challenge was country of origin for that sort of thing. There's a reason why most performance products in footwear especially are not made in Italy, right? They used to do a lot of like soccer cleats there initially, all that sort of thing. Not so much now. So the thing about white spaces are they're exciting, and you might feel they're very like, there's a reason to play in there. There's also a reason why nobody plays in there. It's difficult and it costs too much. And like to the point I just made, athletic brands weren't going to do that. The cost benefit ratio didn't really make any sense to them. And I don't think a lot of luxury brands had sort of the, the technical proficiencies at the time. And I'm just guessing, but they weren't making the product. So that's what we were trying to do. Now, that hybrid, I remember when we first kind of showed you what we were thinking, you're like, guys, no one's going to spend that money for a performance running shoe. And you're right. There's no, like, any performance runner is going to go for the well-established running brand, and not us. So, but I'm like, but I still think I can make a better car. Like, think about it this way. There's two ways to think about it. You have your automotive brands that sell to your mass consumer, and then they also have their, their F1 cars, right? Like Ford or whatever, like something like that, or Toyota Toyota Racing, things like that. Or, people who buy, and we always, the latter days of the brand, we always use the Range Rover analogy. Range Rover, hell of a machine. You can take that thing off the road, go up a mountain, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to. You're taking it to get some coffee. You know what I mean? That's what it was. And I think initially the product was landing more towards that, right? In my head, let's make something you're running a marathon in, you're going to show up, that's a flex, man, this sort of thing. I think the struggle was, Myles, is it was difficult to make at the time. Now, at the time, this is 4 or 5 years ago when I was developing this shoe. Could I do it now? Yeah, I could do a much better job. And that's what I wanted to keep in focus with the brand. This is a concept that we love. And we're going to do our best to hit this. We're going to do a proof of concept. And I realize the limitations right now, but I want to make sure that we're messaging this concept because we're planting a flag here that I think people are going to start playing in this area soon. And I know that as time goes by, I can make this product better. I can make subsequent shoes or subsequent product, accessories, apparel, I can make them better because we just got to get started. We got to get in motion, and then it's going to be easier. Like the technology is going to improve, the materials are going to improve, where we can make a better thing. It's just at the time we were sort of like, trailblazing. And to the point you just asked me about, yeah, it became more of a luxury fashion shoe because of the price point, which, to be fair, we didn't have a lot of margin on that shoe. Like, we really built the hell out of that thing, and it was very expensive to make. So we cut the margin down to sell it so we could get it out there. But it became more of a very functional fashion shoe, and it didn't quite tip the performance in the way that I wanted it to. But I knew that, after doing it, I knew that we could do it. I knew that we could get there.
So is the conflict, because we talk about the constraint theories, right? So was the constraint time where you didn't have a chance to bring in version 2 or version 3? Because there's not a naivete with you or the investors or anyone. They're all experienced operators. And so to push a proof of concept into market and ride it for, you said 5 years or so?
It hadn't been on the market for 5 years. It had been in design and development.
Got it.
5 years.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. So between the art of that start and where we are today, there was some transgression that has you operating your own design consultancy firm full time, and a divorce of the founding partners, from the nexus to the investment hand to the ongoing play. And I've had that experience back, after 9 years of work. So
I remember.
I'm very familiar with it. It's very painful, especially when it's a labor of love.
Yeah.
And you go short, hey, I won't take comp to take care of others. I understand what you've been through firsthand, but what, without kind of slinging,
yeah,
what happened and what lessons have you learned through that experience that may be beneficial to others to say, I need to hit JK up through his agency and talk to him, or if it's just a listen, hey, this is great to know?
I learned a lot. First of all, I learned a lot about who was doing what, development-wise and production-wise, and who could do what, especially in Europe and in Italy, because we were manufacturing out of Italy. That was like a thing for us initially. Didn't mean that we had to always do it, because we wanted to chase where the best things were, but that was important to the start of the brand. So I learned a lot about what could be done, what couldn't be done, and what could probably be done in about another year from now, and that really played into, for me, how I was thinking about building the brand. And yes, we didn't have time to do version 2, version 3. I will say every production run we went into, that shoe improved. We made sure it improved. We were able to do things to improve it. We had struggles in the supply chain. We had done we had changed factories or suppliers on a couple of things. Those all led to improvements. They led to delays as well, which is difficult to absorb sometimes. But I could see where we were getting to. And, it's like we had to start, and we did start, and I could see a path of it getting closer and closer to what, the ideal was and what the real concept was. And that was exciting. Now that progress kind of all got, halted, because, not everyone was down for that long of a, not even that long, but like the duration of that. And I think
duration as far as cash burn, or as far as keeping the eye on the prize?
Both, to be honest with you. I think it's cash is one thing, right? Like, investors getting money, that's a very difficult thing, but it's also very difficult to sort of stay your course. I think that one of the challenges, if you're asking me what I would say to somebody who's looking to do this, aside from the importance of partnering and being clear and everyone kind of being on the same page, it is a fight. You don't hit the market 100% realized. You do have to improve. It's really kind of staying focused on what you're trying to do, because one, it gets hard and it's easy to kind of vary. You can make things easier if you kind of like trade off, something like that. I understand that 100%. Two, there are a lot of people around, ancillary people that you might, bring in on contract, or you might, use for certain things. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone's got their point of view. It's very difficult to corral that and fight, through with what you want, because it's easy to get, pulled in different directions.
Compromise.
And that's not,
I hear you.
Yeah, but that's not being. I'm not saying that to say it's a negative. I mean, you bring people on. Everyone has their own kind of idea. You need someone to really steer that ship.
As they should, sure.
Everyone's
got a point of view.
Yeah, it's we've talked about before, and I've sort of paralleled it to filmmaking or any sort of storytelling, really. But when you make a film, make a movie, you make it a couple of times, right? You write it. Yeah, it's in my head. I wrote it. This is the story. Then you bring people on board, and then you cast it, and then it changes. You shoot it, and it's a little different for the better, hopefully, if you guys are all on the same page and really working together. Then you edit it. It's a different thing. Then you have to message that thing out there. You have to tell people what it is. And oftentimes, you do that correctly or you don't, and that really impacts you. And then when you get to the marketplace, people will decide if they like, or people decide how they're going to use your thing, or people will decide, to come or not. And the challenge really is, especially with a small brand, a new brand, again, trying not to understand it too quickly, is to really know, this is where I believe we could go. What we had with our brand is we had an initial consumer that was very different from what I thought it was going to be. And great to have an initial consumer. Very excited about that. Thank you for your support. We would love to keep you, engaged with our brand as we continue to grow. At the same time, in my head, I'm like, but I think we can do this. I think we can push at these boundaries. I think if we stay here, we're going to die. And that's what
you're looking to diversify the base. You're looking to protect the existing, the funnel management, But you had a commercial person on the team that was responsible for being certain that the product line architecture married to that, right? That wasn't solely on you. Was it?
A lot of it was, but we had a very small team, and not all of them had experience in this industry. I kind of had most of the experience. They may have had experience in, a little bit of experience in some parts, or kind of maybe tangential experience in luxury market, things like that. But I felt like I was constantly being like, this is good, but the fear is if we do try to push, we're going to lose what we have. And I was like, we don't really have anything. We just started. This isn't a business to protect. This is a business to grow. And that became a challenge, I think, to really sort of keep focused. I remember doing certain things because, it's a small team. Now I'm not just designing. I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot of shoots. I'm involved in everything, basically. Involved in the business side, and so are a lot of the other partners. But I remember choosing to do things and be like, oh, is that us? I'm like, us is whatever we want us to be right now. We're not locked in. And, getting a little pushback of like, oh, but this is a little younger than what our consumer is. Good, And I understand there's risk involved in those sorts of things, but in my head, we still hadn't hit where I thought we should go and where we could go. So I didn't want, if I go back to the film analogy, I wanted to create something that people really like, but I want you to be excited for.
Of course. Sure. So it sounds to me like there were a couple complexities that were playing a part. One of which was, and correct me if I'm mistaken, you were building it as you flew. You didn't have clear decision rights. Who's going to compromise or find that settlement when there was opposing points of view, because people's innate desires to add value, or you don't want them on the team. And everyone's coming at it with best intentions, which I respect. So business, in my experience, have taught me who has decision authority, who's got decision rights, blah, blah, blah. So I get that. So, and your challenge to create meaningful product that people will love, the beloved product that makes money. That's why it's in business.
Yeah, I really appreciated both sides of it where, look, I didn't want to fall into the trap of thinking that the shoe was the brand. The shoe, our initial sneaker launch was not the brand. It was our first offering of the brand. I had a greater brand concept that I wanted.
Sure.
And
so the product was the vehicle for your story.
And stepping back to where we were talking about, this is almost there, but not quite there. I think it can be better. In my head, I'm like, it's going to be, here's what I would like to do. Here's this. I don't like using the word vision because it's thrown around so much. Like,
No, but I get it. I totally get you.
But at the same time, look, it's much easier to to restrain a lunatic than revive a corpse, right? So I'm out there like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then for me, I'm pushing like, there's so much we can do. I appreciate having a bit of an anchor on the team that was like, slow it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, let's build a little bit here. Let's, pull the reins in. We don't want to confuse people too quickly. Okay, fair. But at some point, that wasn't slowing down. We had just kind of like, we had dropped anchor. And so the frustrating part was like, we need to build. And you asked me a question that relates to this before. I was asking permission because I wasn't controlling the purse strings. Let's develop something new. Because anything new we want to develop, I need at least a year before we can get that to market. At least, you know what I mean? To do it right for this brand and the amount of like, sort of like search for innovation that we want to put in this, because everything, I wanted to be innovative on everything. It's going to take some time. So let's start now. But it's like, no, we're just this. At some point, I realized we're going to run out of time. And I just started developing things, because I'm going to get there faster. And then you're going to come around and be like, oh, we need something else. I'm going to be like almost there, rather than, oh, let me start. And I'll see you in like, 12 to 18 months.
Lots of complexities here. I mean, part of it I'm hearing is transactional versus relationship. Are we developing a relationship with the audience, or are we being transactional to take care of today? It begs questions of why was there not dual sourcing, product in premium location, secondary. I understand there's a cost and a time consideration to each of those things. And then you got experienced operators, use a word we discussed earlier, with acumen, which could be extremely valuable because they're bringing it from a different industry. So you're not incestuous with your thinking, but perhaps they're not comfortable stepping back and listening. And there's a difference between listening and hearing from my experiences in business. For sure. I hear you, but I'm not listening to you.
For sure. And I felt there's a little bit of that going on. But at the same time, I was in a team that was successful people, and not in my industry, in other industries. So like, I want to listen. I want to understand, like they might know things that I don't, or they might have a point of view that I don't. And you want to respect that. But that needs to be reciprocal too. And I feel like...
So the relationship fractured. Let me hold for a moment. And so you bring a level of empathy and curiosity. I want to understand your point of view, and I want to be heard and understood as well. But somewhere in that paradigm was a fracture because you're no longer there. You're running your agency. They're, the best I can see online, continuing. So somewhere there was a divergence in philosophy or economics or something. And I'm not interested in the drama, because there's always drama in every relationship. I'm interested in lessons learned.
Yeah. So for me, and I'm still processing the lessons on this one. When I had a chance to sort of re-engage the brand with the new majority owner, who was the sole financer, I felt like a lot of stuff had gone down. There was a lot of drama before that. So this felt like, this is finally a good thing's coming back. Did as much vetting as I could, was excited to do it. But I came under it with, again, the idea that I had a certain agency, because this was my brand. I'm kind of the only one here who knows this industry, and you don't have anyone else who does what I do, and we need to push this forward. And this person who was funding it was like, basically kind of retired and, but wanted to have their hand in something. So it seemed like a good setup. What I didn't quite understand or what it took a minute until I realized was that, I didn't have the agency I necessarily thought I had or really wanted. And look, part of that could be on me. Part of that can be like I can be very deferential, especially to people who are also working with me and trying to do things and have different disciplines. So, but I wasn't the money guy. I wasn't pulling the strings. So it got a little increasingly difficult, I guess, to build it the way I wanted to build it. Someone else was wanting to build it the way they thought was right, and they were the sole responsibility of it being alive because they were funding it. So,
Jonny, if I could interrupt for a second,
yeah.
Was there a business plan? Did you guys have a shared multi-year plan that aligned everyone's point of view? Because this conflict that I'm hearing about agency, direction, transaction, funding seems to me that the blueprint of the plan would be the roadmap that everyone aligns with and agrees to.
So that was the first order business when I rejoined it. Was let's put together a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan, because it's going to take us at least that to get this thing going anywhere. I mean, we're already on market. A lot of the heavy lifting's been done to get there, but we need to decide where we're going from here to here. And the feedback we got was, kind of like a barely looking at the 3-year plan, and then we don't need 5-year because that's, too many things change. Market will be too different. We don't even have to think. I don't even want to see a 5-year. Okay. So after like a year, looking back at the 3-year plan, I'm like, well, when do we start this 3-year plan? We're already a year behind, so I'm going to make a new one. Here's a new 3-year plan. With
behind from a product development perspective.
We never did anything towards it, really, very little.
Got it.
So and my partner that I was working very closely with, we were on the same page with this, but it's just we weren't really kind of given the allowance to progress or to really enact that plan we wanted to. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other moving parts involved, and things work and things don't work, and you're constantly correcting, like sales are dipping here, why? Do we need to change agencies for this, that, or like you're constantly doing this, right? So any plan you have is going to automatically be under attack,
Of course.
Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. We were getting punched in the mouth over and over again. And so I understand that, but I felt like there wasn't really, I don't know, Myles, you've worked at brands that have been really good about putting up on the board, like we need to hit this, this, and this. And I think we weren't as strict with that. And for me, it showed up after another year being like, oh man, we're behind where we need to be. Let's look at this again. And I think partly because of that, and partly because there was this like real like kind of push-pull, like I was like, let's go. And, there was like kind of like, well, no, we're let's stay like this, where I was like, we're creating a brand. We're at a very elevated price point. I need other avenues for people to engage our brand. I want to stay luxury, want to stay up there, but I need something else. And if it's not going to be a shoe, because there's a lot of development and initial investment in a shoe, molds and everything and timelines, it's not going to be that. I got to do something. Can I do bags? I'm going to do some bags. I'm going to develop some bags. Hats? Let's do hats. Let's do, apparel. Like, I need something else so people can experience our brand, because maybe they don't like the shoe. Maybe they don't want to spend $600 on the shoe. Maybe they really like the brand. They kind of wish. Can they get something else that is still at a luxury price point that isn't that? Part 2. We don't have a lot of consumers. We're a niche brand. We're small. I need people to buy 2 or 3 times from us a year. If we're going to spend the money to bring this consumer in, I need them to purchase multiple times. And we're creating a shoe that lasts long, that has a lot of like endurance. It's got some quality to it. It's not foot covering. It's not going to fall apart. And we're not a direct consumer $100 price point brand. So the barrier to buy is like, for a lot of these people, it wasn't really anything, but it's still not $100. So I think after a year or so, looking at the plan that was built, that sort of stuff was built in, just hadn't really been enacted on. I was like, all right, well, we need to rethink this. Where do we want to be next year? Come on, let's do this again. And I think at the end of the day, because this industry is hard, starting a brand is hard. And like I said, 3 to 5 years for a build is nothing. Like most brands take longer to get there. You and I, we worked at a brand that took 10 years before it got into black, and it was obscenely funded, right?
So, if I may interrupt.
Yeah.
Quick question. The product assortment, I understand that, and the depth of getting new entries into the business. And I understand the cash burn and designing to a price point and all the other things. Was it a lack of business discipline and structure where there could be a group that sat down and said, this is mission critical? Because we've been with those brands where we've had the intervention of, these shoes don't fit, here's the issue, let's fix it. Or we're missing this style or price point, we've got to plug this in or we're going to lose. You and I had an experience where we're over assorted. There are too many white sneakers. If you go to market, you're going to kill us. What'd they do? They went to market. What did they do? They killed the category. It's not, I told you so. It's the collective discipline of holding hands and saying, we got to have the strength and the perseverance to say, hold up. And that's a discipline.
It is. And look, everyone I worked with in this brand, this group, was very capable and very good at what they did. And none of the stuff was lost, and I did have a lot of agency to be like, we're doing these colors, we're going to change this, and we did have shared points of view and goals. Like, we need to creep the price up a little bit, we need to creep the margin down, we need to get healthy, a lot of that. There was a lot of in sync. I just think that it was difficult because we never really had a planned budget. You know what I mean? It was very much funded as we went, and it's difficult to kind of really build that way. To be every month, well, we need this, we need that, and well, why? And so it felt like, look, if you're gonna do something like this, you got to be in it or not in it. You can't kind of just think this would be a fun idea to do, because it really, one, super competitive, and two, there's no way it's not.
Of course, and I understand. So, and I appreciate what you're bringing forward, and the lesson that I took away from my experience, and the one that I'm hearing from you, is really having clarity as to where the investments are going to be made, what the cash burn will or won't be, what the break even looks like, and really having the business metrics drive a percentage of it, but also the requirement of design-led organizations they need to be innovative, not iterative, especially at your price point. And so when that balance isn't there, as in anything else in life, when a relationship's out of balance, it fractures. So
I mean, honestly, I think about that too, Myles. I think design-led company, that's like a cryptozoological animal, man. That's like Bigfoot. We talk about that, and maybe someone's seen it, but show it to me. Give me some proof. It's really. And look, I work on that side of things, so maybe I'm being a little bit jaded, but it always feels like when it comes down to it, that's really not what it's about. It's a nice idea, but it's at a certain point, what's design led? I don't know. You might be very design initiative and design forward, but it's a business. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I know that everyone's best intentions were there. Everyone held hands, because I met most everyone.
Yeah.
You're saying, hey, we want to create. We want to be meaningful. We want to resonate with culture and art. I totally get it. Recognizing where we are, and we're coming up almost on the hour.
Okay.
I'd like to take a minute and pivot and lean a little bit more into your expertise and your design agency. So you run and operate Genre. Did I pronounce it correct?
Genre, like a genre.
Genre design group out of Brooklyn. And what's the specialty? What's the narrative that you're bringing forward? What problems are you solving? And how do people get in touch with you?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I started doing that because, I felt like I had learned all these things, and I wanted to see if I could, help and give people an avenue to sort of work on the projects they want to work to. I mean, it's especially fruitful during pandemic. I work with a lot of startups, from, initial design to sourcing to placing them, that sort of thing. So being able to take a product from start to finish to get on the market, that's one thing. It's something I can do. And then obviously going through the process of my own brand gave me a whole nother dimension to all of that, on the other side of it, whether it be the marketing, the social media, certainly things, we do a lot of product stuff, whether it be, photography, video, things like that. That's part of it. I mean, those are the things I like to do. You know what I mean? I do design, I do making films and videos, I do photography. So I'm let's put these all together, because every brand that I've ever been involved with needs these things and uses these things. And then, I've been able to kind of acquire a little bit of, sort of business experience just through my own sort of entrepreneurial pursuits that are sometimes helpful for new brands or people seeking new markets and things like that. I maintain a website that's most of my own work. There's a lot of work on there for genre at motorcitizen.com. But yeah, that's basically it, man. It's like, there's a lot of people that don't have someone with like a strong sort of creative ability or who can understand the business side of it. And I was finding people coming to me after they had already sort of worked with someone else, and I know where the landmines are.
Well, Jonny, we're at that hour. I want to thank you for your time and vulnerability.
Sure.
I want to applaud and celebrate you and your former partners. To take a leap of faith in any business at any point in time is challenging, and it's the only way we advance, is those that are willing to push the ball of what's acceptable forward and challenge conventional thinking. So,
yeah. I want to make it clear, like, I am grateful that opportunity came back in my lap. And, I know that if I'd never tried to start that brand in the first place, it wouldn't have came back around. So, like, I recognize, like, you have to do something and it'll work or it doesn't, or it'll come back or whatever. But I was really grateful for that. I really enjoy the people I work with. There's some very strong people there. And I felt like we weren't done, man. Felt like we
sure.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, we both know a reissue of an OG sneaker can set new records tomorrow. So who knows? You could be invited back as a celebrity founding designer or not, a consultant. One never knows. And so the purpose of our conversation, as I said earlier, wasn't to sling mud.
No, I got no mud to sling.
To dive in. What is great design, and how do you balance the commercial aspects, and what lessons were learned? So salute to you, my brother, from another.
Likewise.
Keep after it.
You too, buddy. I'm excited to hear more of these podcasts that you're doing. You got a great lineup coming up. I'm really excited to learn more about these people. I mean, I know about some of them. I've heard about some of them through you, but yeah, I'm excited to kind of really understand more. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to Dave Santa Cruz, who's doing post-production sound engineering with his son.
What's up, Dave?
So super grateful to have their expertise. More than anything else, I want to just shout out and say, JK, please do not understand me too quickly.
I don't understand you at all, buddy.
No one, my family doesn't either, so it's all good. Thank you, my brother.
Take care.
We're signing out from rural Maryland to the world. Take care, y'all.